Hi everyone, and welcome to video number 28 on USA conflict 1954 to 1975. And as you know, we've been looking at the Vietnam War. Now this video, ladies and gentlemen, it's all about the end of the war, trying to get the war finished so that the American soldiers could come back from Vietnam back to America. Now, the peace process will divide into two parts in this video. The first part is up to 1972, and then the second part 1973 and afterwards. Now, first of all, 1968 to 1972. Ever since the Tet Offensive in 1968, peace talks were going on in the background, but there were many minor little quibbles and arguments. Things now that we would laugh at. For example, they were arguing about the size of the flags that they would have in the peace talks. Ridiculous. They were arguing about the shape of the table around which they would sit. They were arguing about where each party would sit. Now, we would think that's ridiculous. And of course it was. But it was holding up the peace process. Slowly, both sides, the Americans and the North Vietnamese, both sides for various reasons moved to more sensible peace talks. It was tricky because you've got to remember each side had different aims. For example, key areas for argument between the two groups. Number one, should Vietnam be united? Number two, if so, how should it be united? Number three, who would govern South Vietnam? Number four, how would the troops withdraw? When would the troops withdraw? These were all key areas up for debate in the peace talks. But as I've said, slowly, gradually, both sides realised that they had to move towards peace. Now, why would that be? It's a good question. There were various reasons why America and North Vietnam wanted eventually to make peace. What were these reasons? Well, let's see. Now I use that word see because if you look in peace, the letter C. If you remember, ladies and gentlemen, the letter C, that should help you remember the ideas, the reasons, the factors involved in each side wanting finally to come towards peace. A breakthrough was needed in the peace talks. When President Nixon became president, he won the election and became president, he was looking for an honourable way out of the war. It links back to Vietnamization and the Nixon doctrine. If you want to recap that, have a look at video 24. He wanted to end the war and fulfill his election promise. In the words of the song 1965, The Animals, we gotta get out of this place. If it's the last thing we ever do. Nixon wanted to get out of Vietnam. How could he do it? Why would he want to get out? The letter C. Let's have a look at them. Here we have USA. First reason, the C for the Congress, the American Congress. They had reduced the funding for the war. C for Congress. Also for America, C for criticism. There was criticism of America's involvement in the war, both back in America and also around the world. America was being criticised. Third, Nixon saw a chance to gain credit if he could be seen in his role as a peacemaker. And the fourth C for America, he wanted to carry out his election promise. The four C's: Congress, criticism, credit, carry out the promise. So for America and Nixon, there were 4 C's, which meant they wanted to be serious about the peace talks. Well, what about North Vietnam? Again, we can use the letter C. Communism. The communists in China and the USSR were reducing their support for North Vietnam. Communist support going down. The next C, America was continually bombing North Vietnam, and they were paying a heavy price. So for North Vietnam, there are 2 C's, communism and the continued bombing. C and C. Also, ladies and gentlemen, there are 2 C's that apply to both America and North Vietnam. The first one, cost. The cost of the war. Financially, it was costing America billions and billions of dollars. The cost of the war would be a factor in America wanting peace, and it would be a factor in North Vietnam wanting peace, particularly if communist support for them is declining. Cost of war. Also, the casualties for both sides were very high, so you could argue the human cost, the casualties. So if you are looking for reasons why America and North Vietnam started to get serious about peace, look no further, ladies and gentlemen, than the letter C. There's the reasons for you. Hope that's useful. Now, if both sides want to be more serious about the peace, what did Nixon do? Well, we need to look at 2 sides, peace and war, talk and conflict. For example, 1969, the Nixon Doctrine, Vietnamization. Nixon wanted to reduce the number of American soldiers. Then he gets his big breakthrough. Nixon held talks with Communist China and Communist USSR. It was called détente. And he gets these communist countries to put pressure on North Vietnam. If North Vietnam is losing support, they might have to be more serious about peace. So that's the first thing that Nixon does. He appoints a man called Henry Kissinger, his sort of top aide, to open secret negotiations with North Vietnam, talking, trying to move towards peace. But at the same time, he's still using military might. 1970, he orders the bombing of Cambodia and increases the bombing of the Ho Chi Minh Trail, if you remember, the trail that brought all the supplies to the North Vietnam troops down in South Vietnam. So he's a mixture of peace and war. Is it getting anywhere? Well, 1972, war is still very much at the front of it. North Vietnam launched what was called the Easter Offensive, a big attack. Now, America would defeat that because they are more powerful militarily than North Vietnam. And America did defeat it. But it was a big shock to America. It showed the Americans that the war could go on for years and years and years. And remember, Nixon did not want that. Remember his election promise. So, USA and North Vietnam have secret peace talks. They're getting somewhere, but the agreement breaks down when the leader of South Vietnam, a man called Thieu, Thiew, he refused to get involved in these secret negotiations. Nixon uses more bombing on the North, but he also persuaded Thieu to accept. This encouraged China and USSR to put pressure on North Vietnam and to force North Vietnam towards peace talks. So that was what was going on leading up to 1972. Peace talks are emerging in a more sensible and solid way for the reasons I've just discussed there. That's the first half. Now, what about the second bit? from 1973 onwards. The late great John Lennon, ladies and gentlemen. All we are saying is give peace a chance. Sorry for the terrible singing. 1973, 27th of January, the 1973 Paris Peace Agreement. Da, da, da. This is the big one. What was agreed? All parties accepted Vietnam would be a single country with no outside interference. No, America, you're not going to get involved. And if people agreed, there would be a reunification of North and South Vietnam. That's the first thing. Second thing, there would be an immediate ceasefire. Peace. Thirdly, the Americans would stop sending aid to the ARVN, the South Vietnam Army. US military, US advisors, US bases, all to leave within 60 days. And by March 1973, there were only 150 Marines left guarding the US embassy. No American interference in Vietnam militarily, the army. Prisoners of war and equipment to be exchanged within 60 days. They were the terms of the Paris Peace Agreement. Well, was this significant? What do you think? What do you think? Years and years of fighting. Does this bring the fighting to an end? Well, in theory, the war was over. But President Thieu, remember him, the leader of South Vietnam? He refused to talk to North Vietnam. The fighting restarts in 1974. There's a new president in America. President Nixon has gone. He's been forced to resign for something called the Watergate scandal. The new president, President Gerald Ford, refused to help South Vietnam, refused to help President Thieu against North Vietnam. The ARVN, they knew that they could not defeat North Vietnam without American help. And Saigon, the biggest city, the capital city in South Vietnam, fell to the north on the 30th of April 1975. There's very, very famous television coverage, ladies and gentlemen, of people clambering onto the roof of the US Embassy in Saigon, desperately trying to escape. And the last helicopter takes off from the roof and people are left stranded. April 1975, therefore, finally, the Vietnam War was over. Let's get the soldier's helmet off. The war was over. July 1976, North Vietnam and South Vietnam merged together to form the Socialist Republic of Vietnam. The Paris Peace Agreement, Vietnam to be one single country. So the war was over. Just to finish with, 1970, the great Edwin Starr. War, huh, yeah, what is it good for? Absolutely nothing, say it again. Well, the Vietnam War. Let's have a look at the cost of the war. Well, it's easy to measure the cost in financial terms, in money, in dollars. Economically, how much had America spent on the Vietnam War? Any ideas? Well, the figure? $167 billion. That's the cost. A huge amount. Significant? Of course, America is the richest country in the world, but even America spending so much in Vietnam led to cutbacks on spending back home in America. That's the financial cost. What about the human cost, ladies and gentlemen? Just on the American side. That's what we've got the figures for. Dead American soldiers, 58,000. Think of a big football stadium. I don't know, something like Arsenal Stadium or Tottenham Stadium holds about 60,000. So a stadium like that, 58,000 dead American soldiers. 300,000 wounded American soldiers. 75,000 of those had a serious disability. After the war, 850,000, it's almost 1 million survivors from the army had severe mental health problems. Today we call it PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. The returning soldiers, they were not treated like heroes. Normally, in a war, the returning soldiers, a country sort of recognises them and celebrates their great bravery. Not this time in America. Often they were criticised, often they were ignored, often they could not get jobs. There was a very, very high suicide rate amongst veterans, survivors of the Vietnam War from previous American soldiers. Well, the war was over, 1975. The greatest superpower on the planet, America, in a way, they'd been sent home. They'd been sent packing by North Vietnam. That's almost impossible to explain, surely. North Vietnam versus America? What's happened there? Why did the United States of America fail in Vietnam? Great question. And the answer will be in our next video. So that's what we're going to look at. As ever, I hope it's been useful. All the best, and I'll see you soon. Bye now.